Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, and there are days where I wish I were a juggler. There are so many issues to talk to you about that it is impossible to really choose properly, because any one means you're neglecting the other. But I'm going to cover all of them. And I have somebody that I have great respect for on the line from Fox News, frequent co-host of Fox and Friends, and also has this week's release at Prager University, Single-Payer Healthcare, America Already Has It. And it is about the Veterans Administration. And we have, he has over 1,200,000 views in these days. Pete, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Thank you very much for having me, sir. Appreciate it.
I thank you. I thank you for your video. I thank you for all your work. And let me bounce off a number of things. Did you happen to catch the news, any part of the news conference for Dr. Dow?
No, I did not, unfortunately.
Okay. He was on, the lawyer was on, and I learned something that, if true, is further disconcerting. And I thought he should have said yes when asked to get off. I do want to make that clear. Having said that, the overbooking, and when you already have your seat, this is not common. I mean, I travel a tremendous amount. I travel virtually every week of the year, and I have not seen this happen. Anyway, he lost his 2 front teeth. He had a concussion, and he needs surgery on his nose, which has been broken. Mm-hmm. Does that affect the way you see it?
Obviously, they handled him more roughly than anyone would want to see, but it doesn't affect how I see it. Listen, it's not the way it should be done. I don't travel as much as you, but I travel almost every week as well. Never seen anything like this. Yes, I've seen overbookings. Usually they're able to settle it, throwing some money at the problem or addressing it another way. I think, obviously, this passenger should have, at some point, given in and then formally lodged a complaint and found another way to take issue with this poor policy and shabbily executed policy. But if someone's resisting, ultimately, it's like anything else in life. What are you going to choose to say, no, we're not going to enforce our policy? It doesn't mean you absolutely manhandle the person. That was overdone. I just don't like the litigious nature in which this will ultimately be handled. Listen, this was not properly done on a lot of levels, but I long for the days when, he would have been, there was a way to handle it without being a multi-million-dollar, multi-year lawsuit, which is, I'm sure, what will happen here.
Do you know why? And I'm putting you on the spot here because I don't know why, and I've looked into this. So I'm just hoping you might. That's all. It's perfectly legit if you don't. But I'm wondering, why don't they just up the bonus for getting off the plane? Why did they stop at 8? That's what me too. That's what I claimed yesterday. They keep going, and it's fun. I'm sitting there. I remember saying next to, well, will they reach 1,000? Will they reach 1,500? And it's cheap. It's nothing money for them.
And that's their price to pay. That's their penalty they're paying. Of course, I've seen it reach $1,000. I've seen it reach $1,200. I can't remember what airline it was, but it was everyone's looking around going, who's going to take this? Finally, eventually, you're going to get a taker, and that's what it should be.
Yes,
as opposed to
that's right. Well, all right, and that's where United made a terrible mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, excellent. All right, let's go on to the Sean Spicer issue. I have been covering vile issues for 35 years on the radio. And, if I were on the radio 100 years, I would have been covering vile issues 100 years. But I can't think of one more vile than the stating that Sean Spicer denied the Holocaust. And I say that as a Jew, as a committed Jew, as an author of a very widely respected book on anti-Semitism. It makes the Holocaust trivial to accuse him of denying the Holocaust. But yet this is what I read in Huffington Post and God knows how many sources.
Yeah, because Dennis, it's not about the truth for those sources. It's about discrediting Donald Trump. and anyone associated with him. The rabid nature of their pursuit of that goal blinds them to the facts of any particular issue. You and I both know, let's give up on the Nazi analogies, especially on stuff like this, and Sean Spicer stepped in it in a way that he shouldn't have, but we also understand that he was not denying the Holocaust. He was not making light of it. He made a poor analogy and immediately apologized for it, multiple places in multiple ways, and yet the media is going to run with it no matter what. I mean, you know, they hate
it was
Donald
the
Trump
first item on ABC, NBC, and CBS News. The first item.
And as you said, you're trying to juggle. There's nothing else going on in the world, right, Dennis? No other big
right. That's right.
Flashpoint. We've got to lead with the press secretary on a misstatement that he immediately apologized for. Would they ever do that to Robert Gibbs or Jay Carney or any of the Obama press secretaries? Of course they wouldn't. It's a double standard that applies across space and time, and President Trump and his cadre are seeing it firsthand.
I'm speaking with Pete Hegseth, who's known to so many of you. I know, political analyst at Fox News, and he has the latest Prager University video up. We'll get to the healthcare issue in a moment. This media that we are now watching, this behavior, is really unprecedented. I mean, they were against George W. Bush. They were against any Republican. But now it's like we're not even going to feign giving you news. Our task is to undermine this presidency.
Yes, I'm with Steve Bannon on this. The news media today is the opposition party. They truly are. They've made a decision that their job is to expose and stop Donald Trump, that what he says is not true, what he says is always exaggerated, what he does is always wrong, and his motives are always impure. And so their job is to work from those assumptions and then unpack why he's wrong, why he's racist, why he's dumb, why he's colluding with Russia. Never look at the facts or never look at his intention or never look at his promises with a square deal, which I think at some level they maybe kind of sort of tried to do with previous Republicans, even though the left-wing bias has always been heavy. This is on full display. The fact, you know these folks, and some of them are good people and all of that, but these are the left-wing Ivy League elites who believe they know better than the rabble of the public, certainly than the billionaire bumbler in Donald Trump, and they're going to use every organ at their disposal to make him look bad. And you're seeing it with every misstep and every opportunity. They double and triple down on that premises. There's been no self-reflection at all, and instead it's full speed ahead in any way that they can take him down. It is honestly like nothing I've ever seen, but I also think it creates a huge opportunity to expose this so-called independent media. Which that's a very interesting aspect of this. I don't know how the average American, if there is even such a thing any longer, I don't know how the average American is taking all of this. Are they believing that the press is unfolding a horrible man as president, or that we are seeing something that should not be, that the press has taken on, as you point out, the role of the opposition party? What do you think the public is reacting? How do you think the public is reacting? I think you're right in the question of the average American is a pretty tough one to answer. I think it's bifurcated. I think it depends on where you sit. It depends on where you voted. It depends on what radio programs you listen to and what TV shows you watch. And that it isn't to bemoan all of that. I like the fact that there are more choices, that I don't have to listen to Walter Cronkite or Brian Williams or give me the news the way they think it is the only avenue I get it, that I have to think that the New York Times is the only place where news is fit to print. I like choices. But what the average person thinks about the viability of Donald Trump depends on what they watch, who they listen to, who they trust. I don't like these so-called independent arbiters like Facebook and others, deciding what's fake news and isn't fake news and grading it accordingly. Do you know that? That 17 videos of Prager University have been by Google? I saw that. I couldn't believe it when I first saw the graphic. I saw it was a bunch of videos, and then a bunch of them were in red, the ones that were banned. And I looked at the topics, and I thought, what qualifies those? I know. History of the Korean War. It's it's sex-drenched. Oh, I see. Yeah. It is. Again, you're going to get distrust in those institutions once that bias is exposed as well. And we are leading to rampant mistrust. What do you trust? Who do you believe? It's difficult in this world today. Yeah. All right. Hold on. It's really good to talk to you. Pete Hegseth, you can see him at Prager University, the video. 5 minutes, and then you will rethink any sympathy you have for single-payer health care.
because we already have it in the Veterans Administration. That's up at PragerU.com. I will continue in a moment, and then obviously I got a lot to talk to you about, but he's a pleasure. I will return in a moment. You are listening to The Dennis Prager Show. A lot of Americans believe in single-payer health care. We already have it with the VA. That's the reason this is so important. And Pete Hegseth gives a terrific analysis. They're all 5 minutes. Show it to your college kid who, if he's one or she's one of the 47%, I think it is, of college kids, according to Gallup, who believe that socialism is better than capitalism. They have never heard anything else, living in the echo chamber of public school, private school, college, and so on. It's a real battle. It's a civil war, as I often say, in our society. I mean it literally. I don't mean it as a figurative statement. Civil war doesn't necessarily have to be violent, although there are threats of violence constantly coming from our fellow citizens, some of our fellow citizens on the left. Pete Hegseth is a political analyst for Fox News, frequent guest, co-host Fox and Friends Give This Video. So we've talked about, have you, by the way, I said we talked about Sean Spicer. I just heard this during the break. Did you know that Chris Matthews said that Hitler never used chemical weapons in 2013? Did you know that?
I had not heard that clip until I was listening to it outside of the break. I immediately shot it over to a bunch of Fox producers and said, have we heard about this? No, I mean, he said the exact same thing. Where was the outrage then?
There's no outrage. It's the famous French phrase "pardon amis à gauche." There's no enemies on the left. That's right.
No, it's absolutely true. And you mentioned the 47% statistic about socialism. The scary part is that same number could be attributed to students that see themselves as citizens of the world other than American citizens.
That's right.
If you don't believe in your own country, you have serious problems.
Right. Well, you know about Superman by any chance? Superman 3 years ago, or I think it was shown in front of the United Nations in the comic strip, comic book, and said, "I'm no longer an American citizen. I'm a citizen of the world."
Fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Yeah.
And the so-called international community, whatever that is, and all the shared values that they hold. It's scary. It's a scary world when you think of it without America or without a belief in America. And that's what our educational institutions, as you know better than anybody else, I have to tip my hat to Prager University. Working with your entire crew on that video was amazing, thoughtful, principled people who put out a product that you can send to your buddy or your friend or your high school or college friend and say, take a look at this and try to tell me why that's not true. It's a powerful medium. You guys do it better than anybody else. I love it.
Look, it's thanks to people like you. I mean, we're getting an all-star team. I'm very. It's really a source of great pride to me to get people like you.
It should be.
So, you said it should be before I said people like you.
Well, no.
No. I'm bailing you out. I'm bailing you out. Just in case.
Thank you. Thank you.
By the way, I need you to know you have a big fan in my wife, and I don't know if you're married, but I will tell you. Then you know if you're what is it? Aside from happy wife, happy life, the wife's influence on the husband is profound, and that is one of the great understatements I've ever come out with. But she really is. She also thinks, and I'm going to really embarrass you now. She really thinks you're good looking.
Well, tell her thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and I am grateful, but I won't touch that.
Yeah, I know that. It's so funny. I just wonder, it really is an interesting question, if a woman talk show host were interviewing a woman who's on TV and said, my husband really thinks you're good looking. Mm-hmm. I wonder, would that be called sexist? See, when I said this to you now, everybody thinks it's adorable, but not sexist.
Yeah.
But it's such an interest. We live in a sort of perverse world.
Well, we live in a world where we have to be worried about those types
That's
of things.
right.
If your
That's
motives
right.
are mine or impure, when
That's right.
they're not, and so we have to second guess or tiptoe, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, we do have single payer health care in the form of the VA. Do you know offhand? I mean, the statistics you bring in the video.
Yeah.
The budget it was all unbelievable to me when I first read your script. So
yeah, I mean, people are not aware. You think of the federal government, you think of a lot of different departments, but the VA sort of oftentimes is not top of mind. But it is the second largest department in the federal government. It has 340,000 employees, as we say in the video, twice the size of the U.S. Marine Corps. Its budget is $160 billion and rising rapidly because, of course, every politician that has, bemoaned the crises at the VA has done the one thing Washington does well, which is spend more money. So the VA's budget has gone up and up and up, almost doubled, I believe, in the last 10 years. Yet veterans are still waiting longer and longer for care because not only do they hire these employees, but the government runs the hospitals and the community-based clinics and all the procedures. And, of course, when they add body counts, it's rarely doctors and nurses on the front lines. It's oftentimes bureaucrats and middle managers at regional facilities and in Washington, D.C. So the VA grows larger and more bloated and more bureaucratic, while the veteran who's waiting for point of service is not seeing any improvement at all, yet they see politicians promising it. It's a perfect preview. And this is for 7 million vets that use the VA. 7 million use it. There's 21 million in America. Do you imagine attempting to impose a system like that on 330 million Americans? I mean, it would be an absolute disaster. So, unfortunately, veterans have been kind of the lab rats of the left's obsession with government-run healthcare, and it has not worked.
I am curious, is it fair or how unfair is it to say that Medicare and Medicaid are also single payer?
It's not entirely analogous because a lot of those hospitals, you at some level have a network or a series of choices, and I'm not a Medicare expert, but I do know that it's not as if every hospital, someone who uses that is a government hospital, of course. So this is what the VA is true single payer. What you would get with Medicare,
right? Because
Medicaid
they would run the hospitals as well. But yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. What would I don't know the answer to this. It's not a rhetorical question. What would a person who wants single payer health care say in response to your video?
They would say, no, you have the facts wrong. We'll show you a survey that shows that vets actually like it, when, of course, it's a cherry-picked survey of only veterans who use the VA and have used it successfully. So the success rate looks high because it's a tainted sample size. And they'll say, but no, it's an quality integrated network of care. The veteran, they're greeted on day one. Their records are there. They don't get messed up to the private sector. It's this whole sort of condescending view that veterans are dumb and incapable of navigating and making their own choices, and that this system, it really is. I wish I was something other than this, but we're always $10 billion away from utopia when it comes from the VA. It's very similar to education. Just a little bit more money,
that's a great analogy.
Teachers, and it's
I would love
lobbies at play.
I really would love. I would like to ask. In fact, forget the average American, because I would not have gotten it right. I would like to ask all 500, 34, whatever the number is, members of Congress, the 100 senators, what's the second biggest budget after the Department of Defense? And I wonder how many would say the VA.
I wonder. Only those focused on it. Otherwise,
that's right. Even they wouldn't know. Listen, Pete, I gotta go. I want to do this again. I really thank you so much for all your work. We're kindred spirits, and your video is magnificent.
Much appreciated, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. 1-8-PRAGER-776, Dennis Prager Show.
Would a government-run, Canadian-style healthcare system work in the United States, a nation of 320 million people? Well, we already know the answer. Just ask America's veterans. They've had government-run healthcare for decades. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, known as the VA, runs the largest hospital and healthcare system in America. The VA employs over 340,000 people, twice the size of the Marine Corps. And it has a $180 billion annual budget, making it the second largest department in the federal government. Only the Department of Defense budget is bigger. The VA is a true single-payer healthcare system. It runs over 150 hospitals and 1,400 community-based clinics across all 50 states. The doctors, nurses, administrators, everyone that works for the VA is a government employee. The system actively serves some 7 million patients, 1/3 of the 21 million veterans alive in the U.S. today. Sounds impressive, right? But for the past few decades, and especially for veterans of the war in Vietnam, as well as the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan where I served, the VA has been an abysmal failure. Inefficient, bureaucratic, and sometimes deadly. Among veterans, horror stories about the VA abound. These stories were tragically brought to light in 2014, when whistleblowers in Phoenix revealed that 1,700 veterans there had waited an average of 115 days just to receive an initial appointment. According to the VA's official policy, that wait time should have been no more than 14 days. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Phoenix VA then lied about it, releasing falsified wait lists to the public to cover its tracks. Phoenix turned out to be the norm, not the exception. The VA's Inspector General found systemic problems across the country. In Fort Collins, Colorado, for example, clerks were instructed to falsify records to show that doctors were seeing more patients than they actually were. In Columbia, South Carolina, delays in diagnosis and treatment directly led to the deaths of multiple patients. The VA program there had nearly 4,000 backlogged appointments, despite a $1 million grant earmarked to reduce delays. And in the VA's hospital in Pittsburgh in 2011 and 2012, there was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease that officials knew about for more than a year before informing patients. At least 6 veterans died as a result. The Obama administration's own Deputy Chief of Staff, Rob Neighbors, revealed that VA healthcare has a corrosive culture with significant and systemic failures. The politicians' response to this debacle? Spend more money. A lot more money. The VA's budget has almost doubled since 2009. They've hired 100,000 new people in the past decade. Wait times have actually gone up, yet not one administrator was fired for the waitlist scandal. The real solution to the problem is not more government, more money, and more bureaucracy. It's more competition, accountability, and transparency. Let the money follow the veteran. If veterans were given vouchers that they could use at any healthcare provider, private or government, they would control their own care. This, in turn, would force the VA to compete for their business, encouraging staff to treat patients as customers, not just as names on a waiting list. Until then, veterans will remain at the mercy of politicians and bureaucrats who continue to insist that the government can deliver quality and timely health care despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The reality is that it can't. This probably best explains why 2/3 of all veterans, 14 million people, don't use the VA at all. And those who do use the VA still get 75% of their health care outside of the VA system, even though they have to pay more for it. In short, whoever can afford not to use the VA doesn't use the VA. Hardly a ringing endorsement of the system. So, could government-run Canadian-style healthcare work in the United States? Given America's experience with the government-run single-payer VA, why would we even want to try? I'm Pete Hegseth for Prager University.
All right, everybody, a timeout from the news, although it affects the news in so many ways, as you will understand. I would not have known about this book were it not sent to me by the publisher, which is a good argument for publishers to send books. And I'm sent, I'm sent hundreds and hundreds of books. And this one I took home with me, and I can't put it down, which is the greatest recommendation I can give. And it is simply called Protestants, the Faith That Made the Modern World. And it makes you realize, by golly, he's probably right. And the author is Alec Ryrie, R-Y-R-I-E. He's a professor of the history of Christianity at Durham University. And Professor Ryrie, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show in America.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I just want to say to you before you say a word that my batting average, that's not a term you would use in Britain. Do you know what batting average is?
I do.
Okay.
I've spent enough time in the States.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. So my batting average with British authors is close to 1,000, which is obviously the highest you can get. I wish I could even discuss this with you. There seems to be a level of British historical writing that we rarely match in the United States, and I don't know why, but I just do you have any thoughts on British historians? I mean, are you trained differently? Are you less subject to political correctness? Do you have any thoughts?
I guess maybe the difference, what people from other countries always complain about British historians, is that we don't do very well on the theory and the kind of formal methodology, and we just tell stories. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I was trying.
Right, but you do tell stories, and the way, I mean, everybody knows about Luther, and yet you kept me riveted with the Luther story. But you don't only do that. If you only told stories, I wouldn't have invited you on. You have theories. I mean, you have a thesis, and that's what I love. So anyway, I just want to tell you, it's just so well done, the book. And is it up at DennisPrager.com? Okay. So you owe me lunch, sir. I just want to tell you in advance that if I do come to the North Pennines, is that correct?
That's right.
That I hope to get. Is that Yorkshire, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Is that in Yorkshire?
No, it's County Durham, further north than that.
Further north, because I studied in Leeds for a year.
Within kind of a stone's throw of Scotland here.
Oh, really? Okay, my wife and I were just near there. Okay,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you manage to find it, then,
yes.
Then you've earned lunch.
That is so true, probably. By the way, is it always raining there like it was when I went to Leeds?
Not always, but yeah, pretty often. Yeah, right. I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world, but you don't come here for the heat and the sunshine.
Right. No, that's understood. Now to your book. I have said to my listeners often, and I can say it because I'm not Protestant, I'm Jewish. So, therefore, I have no axe to grind. Protestants founded this country, and I am proud of, with all its flaws, I am proud of what they started. And I don't think Protestants are given enough credit. And I think your book is a very important argument in that regard. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't think you can imagine the United States as it exists in anything like its present form if it wasn't for that Protestant input in it. I mean, it's not just what brings the Pilgrims over in 1620. It's what then brings wave after wave of immigrants after that. And it also feeds that whole notion of the free society, free inquiry, limited government, all those ideologies as they're formed by Protestant radicals in Britain and in Germany, and which they can't fulfill in those countries, and they bring over to North America, and they find a way of living them out in a new way in the newly independent republic.
Why aren't Protestants or Protestantism given the credit that it deserves? That would get me into the cultural politics, the way these things are talked about in the United States, which I don't know too much about. I think there's a sense that it's been so much a traditional part of American national character that people have been maybe trying to overcompensate for that. There was a quote I came across, which I think in the end I didn't use in the book, of FDR talking to a Catholic and a Jewish friend in 1942, where he said, you know that this is a Protestant country and that the Catholics and Jews are only here on sufferance. He said that?
He said that, and he's joking. Of course
okay, fine, okay.
But he's he's got a kind of barbed wit there.
Right.
And I think there was that set. I mean, the particularly anti-Catholic feeling in the United States was really strong for a long time.
Correct.
And I mean, you don't need to tell you about anti-Jewish feeling. I think since the era of World War II, American society has really backed away from those prejudices and the violence that went with them. And so reasserting that Protestant identity against that sort of background has felt, just a bit icky, and people have been a bit reluctant to do it. Maybe now those things are a couple of generations behind us. I hope we're getting to the point where it's possible to talk in a more sort of level-headed way about the significance that Protestantism has had and continues to have in American society, not just in American society, without saying that means that everybody else has to be driven to the margins.
You delineated at the beginning of the book four things that you felt characterized Protestantism. One of them was so powerful to me that it just clarified America in a way that I had not fully thought about it, and that is they want to be left alone. And I thought that was brilliant. That is why, and if I had to summarize the distinction between conservatism and progressivism in this country, it would be that conservatives want to be left alone. And I didn't know where that came from, but I think you hit it on the nose, and I'll have you talk about that as soon as we return. The book, it's up at DennisPrager.com, is Protestants, the Faith That Made the Modern World. Hi, everybody. That's part of the battle to be waged, joining AMAC, which you get all the benefits, but it's the conservative alternative to AARP. There's a banner at my website, and become they've well over 1 million members, and many of them as a result of our work on talk radio for them. They're terrific. AMAC. I'm speaking with Professor Alec Ryrie, R-Y-R-I-E, a professor of the history of Christianity at Durham University in the UK, and his book, which I am reading, and I am totally open with my listeners, Professor. I don't read all the books that I interview authors about. It would not be possible, and I never claim to. So if I say I am, I am. And I'm adoring it, and that's the reason I asked to have you on. So you made this point, and I'd love you to expound on it, because it is, I think, essential to understanding what I call the Second Civil War in the United States of left and right. This is a big part of it. Conservative, about being left alone. I just want to restate it for my audience. That sure. You mentioned 4 points that characterized Protestantism or Protestants, and the fourth, I believe it was, but one of the 4 is they want to be left alone. And I realized that is the essence of America. And therefore of conservatism in America. Is we want to be left alone. We don't want the government to tell us what to do, except in the most extraordinary circumstances, like you can't murder, you can't steal, but otherwise leave me alone. And as soon as I read that, I realized that is definitely a product of Protestantism.
I absolutely think it is, and I'm really pleased that you picked up on that point. I think it was one of the things that I really discovered while researching this, and I'm going through what's a 500-year-long story that goes all around the world, and I kept coming across this theme again and again, especially but not only in an American context. And it took Protestants a little while to get there, and sort of balanced against that sort of urge to be left alone. There's also an urge to tell other people what to do. And so you have had these more kind of theocratic Protestant societies that are trying to set themselves up as these sort of absolutists societies. And you can see how New England Puritanism was going that way. It had that tendency in it. But for a range of reasons, after the kind of struggles against religious oppression, which Protestants faced in a whole range of different places, not least from each other, this idea that, no, fundamentally what you want from the state, what you want from the government, it's for it to get out of your life and leave you alone, becomes a foundational principle for the United States.
All right. Why did Protestants come up with this, though? Was there something inherent to Protestantism?
It's partly just their experience of religious persecution and sort of demanding toleration. But I think there is something deeper in that as well, because Protestantism is this hugely varied group of different churches and sects, which, you often struggle to find something they've got in common with each other. But the thing which I think they fundamentally have in common, what I think makes it sensible to talk about them as a single thing, is that they believe that the individual human soul stands directly before God. There's no intermediary. There's no churches or sacraments that can authoritatively put themselves between you and God. There's no chain of command. You answer directly to Him and to nobody else. And if you believe that, then you've already rejected the notion that anyone else can tell you authoritatively what to believe, because you've got as much of a direct line to God as anybody else.
I think that is the origin. I do think that you're right. In other words, I think the seeds are in Protestantism. They obviously didn't blossom immediately, but over time, nobody will tell me how to read Scripture.
Yeah, and although it doesn't come right away, but I think that's fundamentally it. And although as you say, it's strongly associated with the United States, with conservatism in particular. But I think you can see the same thing right across the political spectrum in America. Maybe as an outsider, it's striking the extent to which a lot of liberal political discourse turns around the ideas of independence and individual kind of sovereignty over your own self. From the more sort of maybe more collectivist societies in Europe, it's really striking to us how far both left and right in America are dominated by this talk of kind of individual autonomy.
All right. When we come back, I have another question which you can ponder during the break, and that is, are the seeds of self-destruction also in Protestantism? Because the Protestant West is not doing very well now in preserving itself. You may even reject my premise. The book is Protestants, the author Alec, Ryrie. I'm Dennis Prager. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. Protestants, the Protestant role in making the modern world is the subject of this terrific book I'm reading, and that's why I'm having this professor on. He's a professor of history of Christianity at Durham University in Britain. He is Alec Ryrie, R-Y-R-I-E. The book is up at DennisPrager.com. The book is called Protestants, the Faith That Made the Modern World. So when I was at graduate school, I read Daniel Bell, an American sociologist, and I think it was he who stated that capitalism has within it the seeds of its own destruction, and I think we're seeing that in the United States with the rejection of capitalism by half of America's young people. The thing that gave them their unparalleled prosperity is what they most reject. And I'm wondering, does that also exist, in your opinion, in Protestantism? Because Protestantism is not doing well right now, with the exception of perhaps evangelicals. And obviously, it's doing well in Asia, but I'm talking about in the West. Western Europe. What is it? Which country I was just reading is built? It is building not only more mosques than churches. That's obvious. It is destroying churches at the same rate it is building mosques. And I don't know if it was Britain or it was Germany or France, but one of the big countries. And of course, in the northern countries that are very Protestant, Scandinavia, to find a church-going Protestant today is like finding water in the Sahara. So do you think there is some inherent seed there?
Yeah, I mean, I would want to stress that what's happening in Europe and North America, is a small part of a global story that looks really different. I mean, the really big story in Protestantism at the moment, I think, is the tremendous growth we're seeing in Latin America, in Africa, and in East Asia. And that's really where the action is in the story at the moment. But, I live in Western Europe, you live in America. It's reasonable to be interested in the places we live in. Protestantism has this, I think, instability to it. This is a dynamic religion. It's not good at just being settled because it doesn't have the sort of ritual quality to it that a lot of other religious communities do. It's always kind of moving on, wanting to see what the next thing is, and that means that it's changing from one generation to the next. Plus, that rejection of authority that I was talking about before the break does also make it difficult to produce a kind of stable, settled community, and it always makes it possible for new ideas, for dissident ideas to be brought up. And those parts of the world where Protestantism really is flourishing at the moment are the ones where you've got a sort of spectacular variety of different Protestant churches jostling for space, competing with each other, but also learning from each other. Whereas, I mean, the parts of Europe that you were talking about, and the Church of England that I belong to, these are churches which are really struggling because
why do you think that is?
They're the big national monopolies, and I mean, without wanting to push the analogy with capitalism too far, a single provider, big national monopoly, just tends to kind of, it gets flabby.
Right. So that's ultimately what you think is happening. Of course, there's the other factor, too, and that is the vigorous nature of atheism and secularism in
Sure.
the West.
And that's been the case for a long time. We forget how old a problem that is. But Protestants have been facing secularism as what felt to them like their main challenge since the 1700s.
Wow. Really? I hadn't thought of it quite like that.
Well,
do you have any hope for a resurgence of Christianity, which is largely Protestant in Western Europe?
I do. I think things are looking more hopeful for Protestantism in the United States than in Western Europe. But I don't think this part of the sort of traditional culture, even here, is simply going to disappear. It's been written off too many times. I mean, more than a century ago, people were saying that this was doomed and was on the point of disappearing, and it's been a long time dying. I think, though, the future may be the bits of Protestantism that are showing the most energy worldwide are those churches related to the kind of broad Pentecostal, renewalist, charismatic type of movements. And, I mean, we were talking earlier about the leave me alone, get out of my life kind of ethic. Those churches have always tended to do that in a slightly different way, in that they really want to withdraw from political life altogether. They tend to say, well, politics is just rotten, it's corrupt, it doesn't achieve anything, that's not, there's no route to human happiness or social flourishing that way. So we're not going to protest, we're not going to fight back against it, we're just going to withdraw.
Right,
we're
all
going
right.
to ignore it.
Hold it there for a moment, please, because we have to take a break. That we do that on American radio. That's the reason we have independent radio. You know, I spend most of the show, of course, talking about what's happening in the news. But as interesting to me, if not even more so, is how did we get here? That's why I love history. And this book explains a lot of how we got here and the role of Protestantism in making the modern world. The book is called Protestants, and I got to tell you, it's so interestingly written. I don't have patience for boring books. There are people I know who do. They're better people than me. I don't. Alec Ryrie is professor of the history of Christianity. I have one final question. Actually, it's two, but it's related. One, who takes your courses? And two, why don't we have professors of the history of Christianity at American universities?
You've got people who teach this sort of stuff, but they tend to be at, a lot of them at Catholic universities, or at universities with a religious foundation, because in England we have an established church which makes us kind of sort of formally a Christian society. We can do this kind of thing. So we have, I'm in a public university, but I teach in the Department of Theology, which is mostly Anglican, Episcopalian, but lots of other. We've got a lot of Catholics as well. It's great to have that sort of space where you can do Christian theology, but with lots of different of people from different religious backgrounds, and some people with no religious background, all just kind of focusing in on the same subject.
It's great that you have that. So how many students will be taking a course of yours?
We're quite a small department, but we get 80 students a year will come to do an undergraduate degree in theology with us.
Right. Well, I would have done it if I lived there. Professor Ryrie, thank you. It's been a joy to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me with you.
You're very welcome. The book, again, is Protestants, the Faith That Made the Modern World. One of the things Protestants did really well, and Catholics too, has been, and Jews too, has been charity. And food for the poor is an example for these starving kids. And they are starving. I don't use that word ever in America, but they are in Haiti and in Guatemala, and that's all they focus on. Why don't you call right now, 844-861-HOPE, 844-861-HOPE, or go to the Give Life banner at my website, DennisPrager.com. You are the most generous of the radio audiences, and I thank you in advance. And I will see you tomorrow. I'm Dennis Prager. All right, all things working out, we're going to have Andrew McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, but he's best known to you and me as a columnist for the National Review. I have a Susan Rice clip to play. Maybe we'll do that with Andrew McCarthy. All right, we return in a moment. You're listening to The Dennis Prager Show. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, and I have one of my favorite writers, Andrew McCarthy, at National Review. And he's the former assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York. Andrew McCarthy, welcome back to the Dennis Prager Show. I just want you to know that given how long it takes me to read all you write, I wonder, do you do anything other than write? Like for example, do you have lunch?
I do have lunch.
Do you write while you're eating lunch? That's my question.
No, I listen to all my back collected versions of the Dennis Prager Show. What else would I be doing?
Well, it's very sweet of you to say. I mean, it's. Do you, on a more serious note, do you, although it'll sound unserious, but it really is serious, do you ever metaphorically pinch yourself at what is going on with all of this investigations and the Russia stuff and the leaking stuff. Is it sort of mind-boggling?
Well, I'm a little bitter about it, I have to say, more than needing to pinch myself, because I wrote a book in 2014, Dennis, called Faithless Execution, about the importance of the impeachment power and how Madison said when the framers formulated it and put it in the Constitution that it was indispensable in terms of what they were most worried about, which was that the very powerful new office of President of the United States that they were creating not become a tyrant and not usurp the people's liberties and infringe on their rights. And I was agitated enough to write the book because I was so alarmed by what was going on. And essentially what that came down to was the abuse of the very broad discretion that the executive branch has in the execution of a lot of powers that are extremely important to our security and our prosperity, but at the same time, because they're important and powerful, contain a great potential to abuse our constitutional rights and really to undermine our system. So when I put that out in 2014, I had a lot of people throwing stuff at me, including from the Republican side, because the last thing on planet Earth that they wanted was any discussion of impeachment. And I wasn't arguing that Obama should be impeached. Well, I was arguing that he should be impeached, but I wasn't arguing that it would be wise for them to impeach him, because you need to have...
In other words, he deserved to be, and people should understand why you and the founders were so afraid of overreach by a president, but it wouldn't have been a wise thing to do. First, it would have been declared, as, by the way, Chris Matthews and others did on MSNBC, and any raising of the issue with Susan Rice is sexist and racist.
Right.
So any attack on President Obama was deemed racist. In that way, he was completely shielded from proper criticism. So, okay, go on. So you're if I am inferring correctly, you're applying this to the fears were justified because of what you're learning now about the leaks and the unmasking. Is that the correct inference?
Yeah, I would say, to the extent that I get personal about this, and I really try not to make it about me, because it's not. There's a lot more important stuff going on. But I think that history and people's appreciation of what may have happened here is catching up with where I was 3 years ago. And that's what annoys me, because I think there was plenty of evidence and information out there for people to know which way this was trending.
And the trend right now, when you say trending, is towards the government using the IC intelligence community for political purposes. Is that what the trend is?
It is. That's correct. And I think it's in a way inevitable if you take a step back and you realize, well, they use the IRS for political purposes. And
That's
they use
right.
The Justice Department for political. They use
right.
every lever of power they had for political.
This is
purposes.
unbelievably important. I'm going to continue with Andrew McCarthy momentarily. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, U.S. Attorney, former U.S. Attorney, columnist for National Review. Andrew McCarthy, who is about as clear as anybody on what is happening. What do you think? And again, I fully acknowledge that I'm asking you, what do you think Susan Rice's actual activities in this regard were?
If I was investigating this as a prosecutor, Dennis, I would. My theory of the case, knowing that this has to be filled out with proof now, but I think the indications are that this is what may have happened. People like Rice in very high up positions use their authority and influence to unmask intelligence reports. That is, to expose the identities of American citizens who were caught up in lawful foreign intelligence collection operations, whether it was surveillance or other kinds of collection that the intelligence community does. At the same time, phase two, President Obama issues this extraordinary executive order at the 11th hour of his administration, allowing the raw intelligence material and the unmasked reporting by the agencies to be spread widely across the 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, including to lots and lots of people who didn't have a need to know it, making it virtually inevitable that there would be leaking of classified information about the unmasked people. And then finally, the last phase involves people related to but outside the administration, like Evelyn Farkas, who was the former Obama Defense Department official who joined the Clinton presidential campaign as an advisor, and who tells us rather brazenly that she and her colleagues were putting pressure, especially on Congress and staffers on Capitol Hill, to demand as much disclosure as possible about Trump, Russia, and any related issues from the intelligence agencies while Obama was still president, which spreads the information even further out to Capitol Hill and makes the leaking even more inevitable. And then I look at these three elements together and I say, what have we had for the last 5 months? We've had a lot of leaking. And when I was a prosecutor doing conspiracy cases, judges used to tell juries all the time that the best evidence that a conspiracy occurred is success. And it looks to me there was a lot of success the last 5 months.
What was that executive order that Barack Obama passed the last minute? That the information...
Yes, well, what it basically means is the NSA used to have a gatekeeper role where it really was the main agency that vetted raw classified information and decided what was distributed and to whom in the intelligence community. And what Obama did at the end of his administration was basically knock that wall down and enable people from
What was the actual order?
I can't remember what the number was.
No, I don't care about the number. What was he ordered that what? I mean, what words? And paraphrase the order. It's almost inconceivable to me that would be done. So I want to know what was his justification?
That it would enable. Well, let me tell you what he did, and then I'll tell you why he says he did it. It took away the NSA's gatekeeper role and made raw intelligence and unmasked reporting available broadly through the 17 members of the member agencies of the U.S. intelligence community. So in other words, instead of the NSA policing content, now everybody got
right. And
access.
Now, was this true for all NSA documents from intelligence, raw intelligence, or just for all?
No, not just the stuff we're talking about.
Okay, so what was the justification? All 17 now need, for the first time in history, to see unmasked reports?
Yes, the justification was maybe I'm aware of some intelligence angle that we're pursuing that the NSA isn't aware of. And maybe if I had access to the raw intelligence, I would appreciate the relevance. So
I'm just curious, is it fair to say, and I've never said this before, that he jeopardized the security of the United States by doing this?
Well, it'd be a hard argument to make because what you'd implicitly be saying is that the people in the intelligence community can't be trusted. I mean,
well, you said that. You just said by spread. Go on.
Because I think they leak like a sieve.
Okay.
But
wait.
But the flip side of it, but if you want to give him an innocent interpretation, what he
No. I want to give an accurate, not innocent, not guilty. If you, Andrew McCarthy, believe that 17 agencies, they will be leaking like a sieve, and he changes all pre-existing protocol to enable all these agencies to have unmasked data, well, isn't that just 2 and 2 equals 4?
Well, I think so, but they would say, and I know, I feel like I have to give the other side of it, even though it's not my side of it. What he would say is, I've made the country more safe because I've made information generally available to people we trust with classified information anyway, to make sure that all the dots are connected and all the threats are recognized.
Right, so we were less safe in the past when only the NSA could have unmasked raw data.
Right.
That's what he would have to argue.
Right.
When this was passed, why was there such silence in the country, or was there noise and I missed it?
I think, Dennis, what happens is you have a big contentious election in November, and then there's this period of transition between administrations where, there's a lot of attention to the new president, and a lot of stuff slips under the radar. And I think this is one of the things that slipped under the radar.
And then on MSNBC, Chris Matthews and David Corn tell us that the whole thing with Susan Rice is because she's a woman and she's black. This is the level to which the left has sunk in dealing with major issues. I'm Dennis Prager, speaking with Andrew McCarthy. We return in a moment. Hi, everybody. Andrew McCarthy of National Review, former Assistant U.S. District Attorney. So, in a nutshell, because we just have 3 minutes now, in a nutshell, number one, would you like Susan Rice to have to testify before Congress under oath?
I would. I would like to make sure that Congress has gone through all of the relevant documents, because I think she's the kind of a witness I'd want to make sure I had the documents before I...
Okay, number two, do you believe, and obviously this is opinion, but do you believe, based on everything you've seen, that she did unmask Michael Flynn's name or somebody else's?
I'm not satisfied that we have enough information that she's the one who did that, but I do think it's consistent with what she and others... I don't think she's the only major figure in the administration who's doing this.
Number three, what do you think of the notorious tweet of the president that Barack Obama had the Trump Tower and him, quote unquote, and he put it in quotes, wiretapped?
I think it was inaccurate and unfortunate for him to put it that way. I also think it's been overinterpreted, because it doesn't mean that he was saying that Obama illegally leaked him, like Obama, put on an electrician's outfit and went into the place himself and, slapped a wiretap on him. I think what he meant by it was that Obama used the administration's authority to conduct surveillance on him. And if it's understood that way, he may be more right than wrong. So the specific allegation literally that he made is inaccurate, but the greater story, or the broader understanding that we have of it, is it may be more accurate than it is inaccurate.
That's what ends up happening with a great majority of his tweets that are considered absurd in the beginning and which shock even people like me. And then they tend to be fairly accurate, like his saying at the very beginning of this hysteria over anti-Semitism in America, that you'll see it's not my people. And by golly, it turns out it isn't his people. Remember that one?
Yes. I think he landed where he landed because he's got good instincts. I think anybody who doubts that is missing reality.
Well, you keep writing and I'll keep reading. It's always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. That's Andrew McCarthy of National Review. In the third hour, I'm going to play for you 2 minutes of Susan Rice in the interview she had on MSNBC. In the meantime, the male-female hour is coming up. I'm Dennis Prager.